Good day. I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard, coming to you from our Calgary studio here. I'm joined by Western Standard opinion editor Nigel Hannaford, and we have a special guest joining us today, Calgary Nose Hill Conservative MP Michelle Rempel Garner. Welcome both.
Hi.
Great to be here.
What a day. This is an extraordinary episode. I'm thinking we'll just call, maybe it's a whole new show. We'll just call it CLUSTERF with the Western Standard. This episode's not going up on the Wild TV network, so we can be a little more salty with the language today, but we'll try to keep it mostly PG-13. So I think you get one F-bomb in PG-13 movies. But I think the title of today's show sums it up well because, well, here's my second F-bomb. It is an absolute clusterfuck in Ottawa today. Liberal Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announcing his resignation. That does not mean he is resigned. It does not mean he is no longer Prime Minister. It does not mean he is no longer Liberal leader, but Justin Trudeau announcing that he will be stepping down. He is proroguing Parliament. Some of you might recall back in 2009, Justin Trudeau said it was dictatorial and authoritarian of Stephen Harper to prorogue, or that is suspend Parliament temporarily. So it was Hitler when Trudeau did it. When Harper did it. When Trudeau does it, it's just ensuring we have a smooth transition of power. But Justin Trudeau will be stepping down. Parliament is prorogued or suspended until March 24th. We're going to get it. There's a lot of timelines at play, a lot of scenarios that could play out. But we're just going to start kind of high level to begin with. Let's start with you, Michelle. Your first thoughts at the announcement today that Justin Trudeau will be resigning.
Well, after 9 years of inflicting ruination upon Canada in virtually every area, crime, immigration, inflation, debt, every area of the country is broken. His parting gift today was more chaos. So what Justin Trudeau should have done today, given where he took us, was to take us to a federal election. Canadians should have had the opportunity to select the next prime minister or to give a government a new mandate. But instead, Derek, I'm not even sure who's in charge of the country right now, because you're absolutely right. This is a clusterfudgical. So what he's done is he has triggered a Liberal leadership race. That doesn't mean we're in an election. And it's not entirely clear if, as he has expressed in his desire to do, he's going to be allowed to stay on as Liberal Prime Minister while Liberal insiders select the next Prime Minister of Canada. We could be in a situation where Liberal insiders actually select the next two prime ministers. And as you mentioned, Parliament's prorogued, which means as the incoming American administration threatened 25% tariffs on our country, Parliament is going to be shuttered. So yeah, I think your title of the show is pretty apt.
Nigel, kind of high level first thoughts?
I can't get away from the recollection that Canadians voted for this man in 2015, 2019, and 2021. What took so long for the penny to drop that this was a bad choice? And I fear that some of the same people who voted for him even in 2021, I mean, there were nearly 5 million people who did so, will somehow find it in their hearts to vote for a Liberal Prime Minister again, just in the belief that this time it'll be different. It's not different. The whole party needs to burn.
Yeah. What strikes me here is I did some math in the column I just published minutes ago. We've got now, so Parliament's prorogued until March 24th. So I'm guessing the new Liberal leader will have to have been elected, sworn in with their new cabinet by then. So that takes us to March 24th, roughly. And then the government runs, we'll get into this with the supply and budget issues coming up, but essentially the federal government runs out of money March 31st, the end of the fiscal year. Which means you have to have this is a new parliament, essentially, because it's been prorogued. So you have to have a speech from the throne, which takes a lot of time. And then you have to have a budget, two huge confidence votes, essentially the two biggest confidence votes on any parliamentary calendar, in 7 days. The speech from the throne could take more than 7 days alone. The budget normally takes weeks, at least, to go through. And so there's no time there. So, but let's say that the new Prime Minister Carney or Prime Minister Freeland come in March 24th, and they were immediately defeated the first day on a confidence vote, which would be the appropriate thing to happen from both a parliamentary procedure standpoint and constitutional standpoint, and just politically what's needed for the country. If they're defeated on March 24th, then we're looking 5 weeks out from there. That takes us to May 5th-ish, and then another 2 weeks to swear in the new Conservative government, another 2 weeks. We're looking at 155, 160 days before Canada even has a functioning government, all while Donald Trump said he's going to impose crushing 25% tariffs on Canada. There is not a worse time this could happen. This is, I mean, all politicians, to some extent, have their own interests in mind. The Liberal Party of Canada, though, is unique in believing it is inseparable. The Liberal Party of Canada's interests and the government of Canada or Canadian nations or post-net nation interests, that they are inseparable. And the Liberals are willing to drive this country into the absolute pits of hell to hang on for just a few more months at power. It beggars belief that we're even on paper considered a first world functioning democracy at this point. Let's start with some of the timelines and scenarios here. So in my column, I'm operating on the very unsure premise that the Liberals would get defeated as soon as they come back March 24th to the newly constituted parliament after prorogation and a new Liberal leader and Prime Minister is selected. That is not a sure thing. But even if that does happen, Michelle, we would get an election then called probably late March or very early April by the time the House votes non-confidence in them. That is probably, at this point, the sunniest scenario at this point, that we only deal with half a year of a non-functional, almost illegitimate government at this point. Where do you think we're going?
I don't think we're going to have an election in March for several reasons. So there's a lot of people assuming that, and like this is a reasonable assumption, that Jagmeet Singh would finally vote non-confidence after all of this at the end of March, like defeat the government on a throne speech, essentially. But there's a lot of evidence to the contrary on that. First of all, senior members of the NDP, Charlie Angus, for example, came out last week and said that he wouldn't vote non-confidence in the Liberal government under any circumstance. So this is a recent statement. There's also past history. The NDP have said that they would rip up their supply and confidence agreement, and then they voted confidence in the government multiple times. But here's the real kicker. The NDP, they're never going to form government. They don't act like a party that's going to form government. And frankly, I don't think they want to form government. Where their sweet spot is exerting influence on a minority Liberal government. And I think that they want to keep that scenario going as long as possible, even if it means selling their own souls. The side, net benefit for them is NDP MPs that are retiring or not reoffering, or might not have their pension eligibility until October. They have no motivation to vote against the Liberal government because that's their materiality principle. So I think people that are assuming that we're in an election because Jagmeet Singh finally finds a spine in March, I think that they're going to be woefully disappointed. And the proof on that, Derek, is just, I direct your attention to his recent tweet. He put it out about an hour ago. There's nothing in there. Can I read it to you? It says, below is my statement on Justin Trudeau's resignation.
Oh, sorry, Michelle. I just want to note for the studio here, some of our commenters are saying they cannot hear Michelle.
Oh, can you guys hear me now?
I'm not sure. Yeah, okay, I think we're good.
Okay.
It may have just been one of the commenters. Okay, others can hear you. Go ahead, sorry.
Anyway, long story short, if you go to Jagmeet's X page, he doesn't expressly say, he puts out a statement on this day of all news days and doesn't say, like, this is the day for Jagmeet Singh to be like, I will defeat the Liberal government as soon as we come back in March. And it is complete wishy-wash. So he doesn't expressly say that he will do that. There's a reason why he's not going out to the media, because they know that he knows he's going to get pressed on this. And I don't think his caucus is going to uniformly vote non-confidence. So here we are. So we are in a very, I'll just close by saying this to reemphasize what you said, Derek. We are now looking at months upon months of either no parliament or no parliament and a hobbled, insider-picked, lame duck Liberal Prime Minister, maybe leading the country at a time of profound national crisis. So we need an election right now.
I agree, and I think most rational people in Canada would agree we need an election right now, but it does not seem that it's going to happen. The Governor General has granted Trudeau a prorogation. There does not see, unless Trudeau literally changes his mind and dissolves Parliament himself, there is no prospect of that happening. So, I was a little leery on the accusations, made some time ago by Poilievre and the Conservatives that Singh was really just playing this out for his pension. I've become a convert to believe that actually is a critical factor, especially when the NDP came out after Freeland's resignation, says, well, we will bring down the Liberal government. We'll vote non-confidence, but not right away. We'll do it in late February, early March. And, well, those of us who a little bit more inquisitive, we looked in. And, of course, that is February 28th is when Jagmeet Singh's pension vests. But just Jagmeet Singh, no one else, because he was elected in a by-election. So that's when his date vests. But a good portion of the rest of the Liberal caucus, their pensions vest in October. And they need to go to the fixed election date for that to happen. Now, I don't think that's the only thing at play here. I think, Michelle, your more charitable points, I think, are still quite correct, that the NDP knows that its point of maximum influence, and to an extent the Bloc, is during minority Liberal governments. They can exert influence, they can get concessions. There really doesn't seem to be much, though, in concessions left to get at this point. It's the government is just running on pure fumes right now. Nigel, what do you think is a realistic chance this could actually go out past March, that actually the Liberals are propped up on continued confidence votes by the NDP? Because as bad as, as much as the NDP might want to continue to drag it out, I mean, they are being punished to an extent now in the polls. They have to wear Justin Trudeau as much as the next Liberal leader does. They've been standing side by side with him the whole time. And the NDP needs to desperately demonstrate some daylight between itself and the Trudeau Liberals before they go to the polls next time.
Well, you would think so, but I'm not sure they have much to lose, frankly. The longer they can hang on, the better it is for each individual member of the House of Commons who's an NDP member as well. Why would you suddenly find a spine and take out the government on a point of principle and lose 6 months' salary and your pension rights as well? I mean, I think we talk a lot about the pension rights. I'm not sure everybody is quite as driven by that consideration as we believe them to be, but, we're dealing with some shallow people and you don't need too many to alter the equation on this. But I would like to ask Michelle her opinion on a point of view expressed by her former colleague Jay Hill in these pages, well, probably about 6 months ago, when he reminded us that the election date is fixed by a vote in Parliament and can be unfixed by a vote in Parliament, and in fact nearly was, for reasons that are related to pensions, we believe. But constitutionally, this government could go for another year. 5 years is I think at 5 years you get the convoy back, but do you see any possibility that they would try and get rid of a fixed election date and allow themselves to stagger on this basis?
Well, you correctly said it, Nigel. They've already tried, right? Like they introduced legislation in the House of Commons that was at committee stage until Trudeau prorogued this morning to actually extend the fixed election date in a blatant bid to get pensions for NDP and Liberal members that are at risk for losing their seats. So you're right, like they've already done that. And I like just to justify this as a potential inevitable or a potential outcome, these, as Derek said at the front end of this, these are people who consistently, time and time again, put their party ahead of the interests of the country. These are people who are all complicit in Justin Trudeau's decisions. They're all one and the same. You know, Pierre Poilievre went out today and essentially said, there's been no change. There's been no change. These people are all complicit. So they all know this. And, you know, I think we're in this realm of crazy where you've got a small handful of people putting their delusional political self-interest ahead of everything in the country, ahead of everything. So who knows what would happen? But this is why it is so critical, regardless of how people vote. If they care about this country and our democracies, that people are loudly asking for a general election. That's what we need to do right now. So as Derek said at the front end of this segment, that we're not taking months and months and months and months, or as you're suggesting, over a year to get to a point where, you know, there's a government with an actual mandate. That needs to happen as soon as possible.
So I love the idea of a mandate, but they haven't had that for a while. I'm just thinking when we take Mr. Trudeau out of the mix, you have left the Liberal Party, which is really a progressive party and not liberal in any real sense. And they have an agenda of climate change and various woke priorities. Give them a year after October of this year, they could do a lot of damage. They might
I'll just say this, I think you've sort of obliquely touched on a really important point, which is that none of the front runners to replace Justin Trudeau, and none of the caucus members that have, you know, only after the cabinet shuffle started calling for his head, none of them have expressed any sort of disagreement with any liberal policy, any woke liberal policy, nothing. None of them have challenged their disastrous bail reforms or catch and release bail policies. None of them have expressed regret over, you know, massive inflationary debt spending. I could go on and on. Their only rationale for wanting Trudeau to resign is the fact that they're seeing their fortunes decline in the polls. So, you know, who knows what's going to happen, but certainly none of these people, you know, are coming forward with any sort of indication that they're going to change their woke course. So yeah, we need an election. We absolutely need an election.
So, but we're not going to get an election. There just doesn't seem to be any real path for that to happen at this point. And best case scenario, as I kind of went through the math, our best case scenario, the government gets brought down when it returns March 24th. Best case scenario. So that leaves us, by the time that election's done and new government sworn in, half a year without any effective government in Ottawa. We've already got the provinces taking control of border security out of necessity, because there's just an utter vacuum of federal leadership at this point. But I think, and we've alluded to this already a bit, but I want to get into it a bit more, is dealing with the existential economic and political crisis of the Trump presidency. There's a lot of potential good that could come from the Trump presidency, but he is playing America first. He's not playing friends or Canada first. And he has said he's going to impose a 25% tariff his first day in office. There's some soothsaying around, you know, is he going to put it in a paper but suspend its implementation for some time? That's really hard to say at this point. But at the least, we need to be down there negotiating, trying to get a deal. Trump is a deal maker. He probably prefers a deal over doing this because it's not good for America as well. But we have no effective government to actually negotiate. Who are we going to send down there? We're going to send Justin again?
And we don't know if it's going to be the same cabinet, right? Like if there's cabinet ministers that are going to resign for leadership, who knows, right? There's nobody in charge right now.
Yeah, and even if, you know, Justin Trudeau is the nominal head of government, he has no effective authority.
It's a lame duck.
Beyond even lame duck at this point, I'd say. Like, he is a mere placeholder. So is Justin supposed to go down, or any other cabinet designate that he sends down? Trump is just not going to be able to take them seriously. Now, our best case scenario, I think, is that Trump says, I'm just not going to negotiate with you guys until you have a government in place that can speak for Canada. Worst case scenario is he actually does negotiate with the current Canadian government, such as it is, because it's so weak that he feels he can take advantage of it, that he can get a more zero-sum deal out of dealing with such a weak and almost non-existent Canadian government at this point. I don't know what's worse from your perspective, Michelle, or Ms. Rempel, is it? I don't know. Is it worse for us that Trudeau would just refuse to negotiate with the Canadian government as currently constituted? Or is it worse that he does negotiate with them because he knows he can run the table with them because they're in such a weakened state? Or third, that the Canadian government, and this is a very real possibility, I think, is that the Liberals and the Liberal leadership contenders, for the political reasons of winning the Liberal leadership, and Justin Trudeau for burnishing his reputation, because he doesn't have to live the consequences of anything anymore, that they go hard anti-Trump, hard anti-American, play that kind of liberal reflex, that has a long history of the Liberal Party, and maybe even in Canada, for votes, that they go anti-American. They're willing to put Canada in a very, very bad place to be punished by Trump because it might play well politically to be anti-American and anti-Trump. Those are kind of the three scenarios I see.
I can answer your question by kind of refuting a premise that you stated earlier, which is that there's no way that we could have a general election. I actually disagree with you. I think if Jagmeet Singh, the other opposition party leaders, if they wrote to the Governor General and sort of publicly started banging the drum, like, we do not have confidence in this government, there is now functionally not a Prime Minister of Canada, we need an election, I think that would change the tone and tenor. And I also think that if provincial leaders weighed in to the Governor General with the same type of comment, which some have already done, perhaps not directly to the Governor General, but have expressed a need for a general election for this reason, I think that, she would have an obligation to think about bringing Parliament back almost immediately to have a test of confidence. But again, I stand behind my earlier statements that Jagmeet Singh isn't politically motivated enough right now to make that decision. And that's why it's so important for Canadians to put pressure on Jagmeet Singh and not just let him get this free ride to the end of March, that they have to say, you need to ask the Governor General for a confidence, Parliament to be recalled to have a confidence vote. But going to your comment specifically about the Americans, again, this is something that Jagmeet Singh and the NDP and the Liberal government should be punished for, not only putting us in a position where we're not able to negotiate, as you rightly outlined, but also that they've left our economy so weak going into this situation. Things like, our leader, Pierre Poilievre, talking in the House about how Canada, we're essentially sending jobs down to the US just through the carbon tax. The carbon tax is going to increase, right, in this, just almost during this period of time. So, I think the real solution for this is for Canadians to really put a lot of pressure on the NDP and the other opposition party leaders to be demanding essentially a vote of confidence one way or the other, and really saying that the clusterfugical that Justin Trudeau has delivered to Canadians today in triggering this leadership race and this uncertainty has put us in a situation where we could lose a lot of jobs and really see destruction of the Canadian economy.
I think we need another convoy at this point. When you had a government and broadly a political class that was just refusing to listen, people taking matters the way they did really did force change across Canada, resulted in new leadership at the Conservative Party of Canada, resulted in new leadership in Alberta for the government here, resulted in the federal government really overstepping its constitutional bounds into full-on authoritarianism to try and put it down. But the backlash to that, I think, really did end up having a change in public policy. I almost wonder if another convoy is going to be the answer here.
Can I make a quick comment on that? It's interesting that the person who really deserved to have his leadership scrutinized by the Canadian media after the 2021 election was Justin Trudeau, right? When you think about it, anybody with any political sense, including Justin Trudeau, his chief of staff, Katie Telford, should have realized that by calling that unnecessary election on the premise that they were going to win a majority, they didn't. they should have realized that his time was up. And if they had pushed him then, or in any of the subsequent summer, recesses of Parliament, the Liberals wouldn't be coming to Canadians with this absolute mess today, right? So, but just to your point, I think Canadians do need to really, regardless of political stripe, out of care for our democratic institutions, be speaking up and just demanding an election right now. That's really what we need.
So Nigel, I want to kind of put the same question to you as I put Michelle. With our incredibly, I wouldn't even say impaired ability to negotiate with Trump, I'd say almost non-existent ability to negotiate at this point. There's kind of three scenarios, at least as I'm seeing it. One is Trump is just not even willing to talk to us, which almost might be our best case scenario at this point. That he's just saying, get back to me when you've got a government that can actually speak for your country, that has confidence of the House, that I know is going to be there in 6 months. The other one is possibly even more dangerous, that he is willing to negotiate with the Liberals because they're in such a weakened state. And then the third is that the Liberals go full anti-American, nativist, and to try and drum up political points, but to the great detriment to the Canadian national interest. A bunch of anti-American.
You mean that they would suddenly discover that we're not a post-national state after all?
Yes, that there's a Canadian national identity, and it's worth defending. All of a sudden, that Canada isn't this genocidal, monstrous state. But they take the anti-American and anti-Trump route because it might play well domestically, but utterly devastate our national interest. Which of those? Maybe you want. Those are the three scenarios as I see it.
Well, let's kick these things around. I mean, I have been making the point consistently since Mr. Trudeau got in real trouble that it's all about him, that he is a man who has no real loyalty to the Liberal Party of Canada, rather regards it as a vehicle for his own glorification, because he is the man of principle, the man with a grand vision, the man who sees further over the horizon than the rest of us poor saps. So if that is actually accurate, and I realize that I make these judgments upon him without any written evidence, only what I see here come from his own lips. The man is a narcissist, as Jordan Peterson recently described him, a wounded narcissist, and therefore the rational thing is probably not going to happen. The rational thing being that, well, we've just seen it go out the window, no election. So he will wrap himself in the flag, say I. He will present himself as a reincarnation of the old anti-American liberal. He will make fierce and unyielding denunciations of the U.S. president. He will cast Mr. Poilievre in the same light as the British Guardian newspaper did recently and try and present him as Trump light. And he will try to play upon the suggestible nature of Eastern Canadians, that somehow there's nothing good comes out of the United States and I'm the man who must resist it. Although it will not necessarily put him back into office, it will validate his position and cement his reputation as a great man. And that, I think, is perhaps more important to him than any other consideration.
Okay, before I know, Michelle, you have to go soon. We'll continue a little bit after you're gone, but I'm gonna put it maybe a tough one to you. We've got some of our folks working on a column on this right now, but one thing that's that I've been considering long in the lead up to this now, but especially as there seems to be I think the Liberal leadership's probably, not that I'm any great insider in the Liberal Party, but it's likely to come down to Chrystia Freeland or Mark Carney. So let's just say Chrystia Freeland. Maybe she's even got the insight because she's actually in caucus and has been there. I fear for what she would do, not just for the Liberal Party. I'm actually quite happy with what her leadership might do for the Liberal Party, but I fear for what her prime ministership would do for the prospect of a woman ever truly leading Canada. Because, well, it's very unfair to paint... Canada's only had one female prime minister, Kim Campbell, for roughly 30 days. And she was put in a similar kind of position. The PC government in 1993 was wildly unpopular, blowing apart at the seams, and Brian Mulroney steps down, and she stepped up and took the fall. Now, she wanted to take the fall. Well, she at least wanted to lead the party in, but she ended up taking the fall and led the PC party in 1993 to the biggest electoral defeat in the history of the democratic world, going from a majority government to 2 seats, effectively ending the PC party as we knew it for all time. And if Chrystia Freeland takes over from Justin Trudeau right now, well, the Liberals are polling at the same 16% that the PCs got under Kim Campbell in 1993. This would mean, on paper, Canada's had 2 female prime ministers, both of which go down potentially to the most historic defeats in the history of the country. And I think that would build, however unfair, an electoral record that's not very good for female prime ministers. I don't know. What are your thoughts on?
Yeah, first of all, I appreciate the question, because it gives me an opportunity to say that I really don't think that if Chrystia Freeland was the next opponent or the next leader of the Liberal Party of Canada, that if she was rejected, which I believe she would be by Canadians, that it had anything to do with her gender. I think it would be because I just want to say this. Like, I just fundamentally disagree that Canadians would reject a candidate based on their gender right now. I mean, you look even in our province of Alberta, you've got Danielle Smith, who, is a very strong female leader, just received a massive showing of support from within her party in a leadership review. And I really do think Canadians measure candidates based on their merits, as they should. And I mean, for Freeland would be rejected because she was like the 2IC. She was the architect of most of the Liberals' disastrous policies. It's interesting. The only other reason why I'm glad you raised her, Derek, is because Trudeau in his speech today, he actually really threw her under the bus. It was like this amazing stab in under a velvet glove. He goes, Chrystia, she stood by me for 10 years. And then he went into like just sort of re-emphasizing how she was like this, his essentially complicit in all of his decisions. And I don't think that Canadians are going to forget that she was complicit, that Mark Carney was like the Liberals, senior advisor, godfather to her children. Like, it's this incestuous nest of woke insanity that I think that's what Canadians are going to be measuring. And I am, as a woman in politics, I'm just really excited to see a change in government, no matter who the Liberals decide to put up as the next hood ornament on the Titanic of disaster. So giddy up. It's time for an election, and that's what we're going to be pushing for.
I certainly did not mean to imply in any way that Canadians wouldn't vote for a female. In Alberta,
I don't think they'd vote for Chrystia Freeland.
No,
because she's a disaster. She is an unmitigated disaster that never should have been put at the helm of
in Alberta. Most of the candidates for the last few election cycles have either both been women or the successful ones.
Yes.
I'm wondering if we'll ever have a male premier in Alberta again. But I mean that some people might draw the wrong conclusion afterwards that if there's been two have been such a disaster. I don't think that's fair. But I think if you look across the democratic world, the successful female leaders in these countries almost always come from the right. You look at Italy, you look at the United Kingdom. Merkel, I hate to use because she became left, but she was when she first came, she was at least viewed as center right.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, Trudeau is a fake feminist, of like the archpriest of fake feminism. So I could totally see Liberals, who I never let women stand on their merit and always rely on tokenism, trying to pin Justin Trudeau's disastrous reign of 9 years on a woman. I can totally see that being their narrative. But as far as Canadians go, Canadians are just and smart, and they know better. And they're not going to be fooled by, changing out one Liberal woke Trudeauite for another. going into the next election. They want change. They want safe streets, affordable groceries, affordable housing, and they want the budget to be fixed. And that's what conservatives are going to offer. So, you know, I really do think that this is going to be an election when it happens that contrasts, you know, very different policy and outcome visions for the country. One vision led by Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre: axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, stop the crime, versus nonsense and woke insanity led by a Trudeau acolyte. It's a pretty clear choice, and it's one that I hope will be given to Canadians in a general election as soon as possible.
All right. Thank you, Michelle, for joining us. I really appreciate it. I'll let you get back to work. I know it is.
It's a day. Take care. Thanks.
It's a day. All right. We're just going to continue on just a little longer here, myself and Nigel. Nigel, let's talk about, I mean, the next Liberal leader is likely Carney or Freeland. We don't know for sure. But, you know, if in another universe, you and I are working in their new PMO, I think one of the first things they have to do is try to distance themselves from the Trudeau legacy. I think a textbook example of this is here in Alberta when Jim Prentice succeeded Alison Redford. She was wildly unpopular when she left office. Some of it was policy, some of it was just scandal. But he was able to, at least temporarily, successfully distance himself, at least in public perception. It was all the same people around him as were around Alison Redford. It was the same crew. It was the same government, effectively. But much to my frustration and consternation at the time, he was able to make a few very symbolic moves that said, I am not Alison Redford. I'm Jim Prentice. This is a different government. And it wasn't. But the public, for a time in the polls, very much did buy that. It was undone later on after he had the floor crossing and then a series of other debacles under Jim Prentice's own making. But he was able to make a few key moves, and they were very easy and almost tokenistic, but it worked with the public most prominently. He sold the airplanes that had been at the center of several Alison Redford scandals. It wasn't even necessarily good policy, but it was good politics. He did a few things, and the public said, we'll give you a chance. If you were advising in this world, the next Liberal Prime Minister, Freeland or Carney, what are some of the things you could do to distance yourself from Justin Trudeau in the public's mind without overly angering the Liberal base?
Well, that's a good question. But what is the Liberal base? I guess we can have a discussion of that. You know, let's just say it was Carney. Mr. Carney, I think, would be very ill-advised to accept the position. He's got a splendid personal track record, governor of 2 national banks. Why would he want to be trade that in for leadership of a party?
He is apparently very interested in calling around. So
well, that actually worries me, because if there is no upside for him personally to become the captain of the Titanic as the bow is already going underwater. So what would be his ulterior motive for accepting such a position? And it has to be something that we wouldn't like. So I'm actually challenging the premises of the question that they might even try to distance themselves from the legacy of Mr. Trudeau.
Well, that's another strategy is embrace it and say,
say, listen, Mr. Trudeau, you know, alas, we never understood him, but he was right on climate change. He was right on so many other things, and especially upon reconciliation and EDI. You know,
but let's say the new leader wants to distance himself. What are some of the things you think they could do?
They're costing them much political capital. Well, I suppose that they could, you know, make an impassioned plea for meritocracy while quietly carrying on with their existing diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because people don't like the idea that, you know, the phrase ticking the box about people, they don't like that. And it would cost him a lot to do that. He can't, no Liberal leader can walk back from climate change, but they can soften it. We've already seen them walk back the net zero from 2035 to 2050. I think that's very largely to accommodate the vast power needs of the artificial intelligence industry that they want to build. But they can talk about the AI industry they want to build and just not be quite so in your face.
Killing the carbon tax. I mean, the Liberal Party is bound up in it, but they're also bound up in it. Like it's an anchor around their neck.
Yeah, well, they can't do that, but they could stop further increases. They could sideline Stephen Guilbeault. It's always assuming he's even there after some future election. But we're not even talking about the future of what's after a future election. We're talking right now. If Mr. Guilbeault took his place on the backbenches, probably would resign, and just didn't talk about the things that people hate, which is wokeism, and any kind of policy that seems to fly in the face of common sense, which is net zero by 2035. You know, even if you're a registered greenie, you know, well, how the hell are we going to do that? Well, if it's impossible, don't commit yourself to it. That they could do. The other thing that wouldn't cost them anything, I don't know whether they would ever contemplate it or not, is for heaven's sake, change the channel on the Canadian Armed Forces. The wokeness that has been allowed to go into that, where fellows were allowed to dress up as women and still report for duty. I mean, I think some of that's been pulled back already, but the very fact that it was ever out there in the first place offended so many Canadians. So real acquisitions of military equipment and a real return to military values wouldn't actually cost the Liberals that much. They could even go back if they felt they needed justification to the glory days of World War II and how a Liberal Prime Minister led us through the Second World War and our armed forces were brilliant. They could do that sort of thing.
All right.
All fake, but
yeah,
possible.
Yeah. Not much of it, I think, would be convincing to Canadians, but I was wrong. I didn't think Albertans would temporarily buy when, you know, you had the Apprentice pivot. And for a few months, Albertans did buy it. In the end, they didn't, because it was seen to be insincere in the end. But yeah, you know, it could buy them a little time. All right. Well, anything else?
No, I think we've got to get back to writing.
It is a hell of a day here,
isn't it?
All right. Well, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. The Western Standard, remember, is one of the only very few non-Justin Trudeau government-funded media outlets. Sorry, we have a little training going on today. Not quite done yet. The Western Standard is one of the only media outlets in Canada not taking Justin Trudeau's big media corporate bailout. We are supported by advertising, but most importantly, by membership subscriptions from people like you. We need your support to continue doing the work we're doing, holding governments accountable without being paid by them first. Go to westernstandard.news right now. Click on subscribe. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year for unlimited access to all Western Standard content. We have got the only actual real physical non-CBC newsroom west of Toronto in Canada right now. And boy, I tell you right now, it is busy. I can see it through the glass window just over here. Our people are working full steam, giving you the very best and breaking news in political developments that are happening today. So we hope we can count on your continued support. Thank you very much for joining us. God bless.